It's got, I mean, it's got to be in the same place.
Or it's gotta be like some big open farm field.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I thought they'd still do it on the water somewhere. I'll tune in. I like to watch it.
We are streaming.
Okay.
Hey, I'm out
Uh,
there. Bye.
Hey, good evening. I'm going to call to order the special board meeting workshop redistricting for Steeplechase Elementary for the Boone County Board of Education, September 3rd, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. If you would, please join me in the pledge to the flag. Okay, thank you for that. So just a little bit of housekeeping items before we get started. We are socially distanced in this room for those online watching us. We are limiting the attendance as well. The meeting is being streamed on YouTube if anyone wants to catch us there either now or later. I also want to point out up here on the podium, we are socially distanced. I'm adhering to the Healthy at Work guidelines that says when you're socially distanced, you can take your mask off. This is a business meeting. We're doing business. I realize there is school revised guidance for the schools, but it's very inconsistent with what we're seeing in other guidance. I would like to also state that while we're on the mask topic, that we have a holiday weekend coming up. We do encourage everyone in the district to be as safe as possible. Try to do your part to make sure that we don't have a spike coming out of the holiday weekend. We've seen that coming out of Memorial Day and the 4th of July, and we're trending really, really well in the community and in the region. And we want to make sure we maintain that momentum so that we can get back in the buildings. So with that, we are at item 3 on the agenda, board workshop on the redistricting for Steeplechase. Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to open this workshop for redistricting for our new elementary school to Eric McCarter for his presentation. There will be no action at this meeting as it is a workshop for board members to hear the work of our redistricting committee. So we thank them for their work and welcome. Mr. McCarter.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. On behalf of the redistricting committee, I would like to bring up Mike Ford to do our presentation tonight. We have met 3 times previously with this project, and we've developed 2 different scenarios at this time to present to you. Mr. Ford will go through the PowerPoint presentation and give you all the background knowledge of the work we've done, and then we will move forward with any questions that you may have at the very end.
Thank you, Mr. McCarter. Good evening, board members, Superintendent Turner. You've already been provided a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that I'm about to go through with you. That's your copy to keep, and hopefully it will enable you to get a better grasp of the organization of the committee, the workings of the committee, and the project to this point in time in regards to creating a student population to open Steeplechase Elementary. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and begin the presentation. In a redistricting project, there are specific items and ideas that we have to cover that is provided as a charge to this ad hoc committee by yourself, the board. These are, we have to answer what is educationally best for all the students that are involved or affected, impacted by this project. We have to maintain existing neighborhoods the best that we can by using established community boundaries. We are to decrease overcrowding in schools to allow for future growth and increase population in declining schools to allow successful educational programs. We are to provide more consistent feeder patterns to middle school and high schools from this elementary project. We are supposed to look, we are charged to look at any issues in regards to transporting students as we develop a new school boundary. We are to provide clean boundaries to the best of our ability with no crossing patterns for transportation efficiency. Also, we are to take into consideration time and distance that children have to travel on a school bus to and from school. And finally, as we look at a redistricting project, we have to take into account how does moving children around impact the socioeconomic makeup of the schools. And we measure socioeconomic makeup of the schools by the number of students in a school that are receiving free and or reduced lunch services through federal programs. The committee charged for this specific project, moving students to the creation of a new school district from current elementary school districts. And we are looking at moving students from New Haven Elementary School to the new Steeplechase Elementary School, also moving students from Collins Elementary School to the new Steeplechase Elementary School. Now, please take into consideration on this slide, that's the current charge. As we walk through this project, at any time, the board can provide new direction and new charge to the committee. But this is the current charge that we have been working under since earlier this year. The process for a redistricting project, first of all, there's a timeline for specific process. I'll go through that timeline in just a few moments. The Demographics and Growth Committee works in conjunction with the Boone County Plan Commission to develop a plan with the charge in mind. I'll be introducing members of the Boone County Planning and Zoning Commission that are part of this committee and work very diligently within this project. And how we utilize the Geographical Informational System from the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is a computerized database that allows us to look at multiple scenarios based on our goals in just a matter of minutes. We actually began this project a year ago, and that was simply at the district office starting to look at what could be a school district boundary for Steeplechase Elementary School. For those who are not aware, Steeplechase community is located off of Richwood Road in the southern part of the school district. The entrance to Grand National Boulevard, which is the main thoroughfare that runs through Steeplechase community, is directly across from Triple Crown entrance off of Richwood. Hopefully that gives you an idea of the area that we're talking about. So Steeplechase Elementary School is under construction at the very southern end currently of Grand National Boulevard. And when we start thinking about construction as the initial part of the process, we start to look at what children and or schools may be impacted. And that starts a year ago. At the 6-month mark, we reduced those scenarios to a working number. In the case of this project, there were 3 initial scenarios that were provided to the committee from this work at the district office. And there you go. At the 4-month mark, we created 3 possible scenarios. At the 3-month mark, we formulate the redistricting committee. At the 2-month mark, which is going to be late September, early October, we will actually provide public forums so that practicing transparency, which is a common thread throughout the district, we will allow the community to come in, see a very similar presentation that you're going to see throughout the rest of this time, and be able to provide input. At 1 month, we will look at finalizing a recommendation to you. We're hoping that will be in the late October, early November timeframe, and then we will be looking at the November, possibly more realistically, the December board meeting to bring to you the final recommendation by the committee for your consideration. And ultimately, the Board of Education sets the parameters and districts of any school district. We're just doing the work to create that possibility so that you can make final determination on the school district boundary for Steeplechase Elementary School. The Demographics and Growth Committee is made up of principals and parent representation from affected schools, district level administration team and board members, and staff from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And here you see the members of the committee that are from district office: Superintendent Turner, Deputy Superintendent McCarter, Assistant Superintendent Pori, myself, Mr. Barris, our Director of Transportation, Mark Raleigh, the Assistant Director of People Personnel, and Chris Brock, the Assistant Director of People Personnel. Our board members on this project this time, Ms. Bird and Mr. McIntyre. We have school representation from Ms. Goebel, Principal of New Haven Elementary School, Mr. Loring, Principal of Collins Elementary School, Ms. Krieger, Principal of Shirley Mann Elementary School, and Ms. Best, Principal of Ackerman Elementary School. We also have parent representation: Ms. Thornton from New Haven, Ms. Penrose from Collins, Ms. Northcutt from Shirley Mann Elementary School. We do not have a parent representative from Ackerman Elementary School for this reason. There was one scenario of the 3 that we initially introduced to the committee that would have impacted Ackerman Elementary School. So that's why Ms. Best was invited, obviously, to be part of the committee. In looking at that scenario, it was very quickly removed from consideration for logistical reasons. And so we never picked up a parent from Ackerman Elementary School, because on the two scenarios that I'm going to introduce you tonight, neither one has Ackerman as part of any movement of students. However, Ms. Best has very graciously offered to remain on the committee, because a couple of the properties that we are looking at that will be moved from one school to another are directly adjacent to her population, her communities that feed directly into Ackerman Elementary School. So down the road, if there was an idea that we had to do some shifting and possibly move a community that would impact Ackerman, Ms. Best again has graciously offered to remain on the committee and give of her time during this work, even though right now the two scenarios that you're going to see do not impact Ackerman Elementary School. So that's why there's not a parent representative from Ackerman. I want to introduce two individuals very important to this project. First of all, Mr. Kevin Costello, the Executive Director of Boone County Planning and Zoning Commission, who is in attendance tonight, and Mr. Steve Gay, the Director of GIS Services from Boone County Planning and Zoning Commission. We could not do this work without their assistance. First of all, both Mr. Gay and Mr. Costello provide expertise in what's going on in the county with growth, infrastructure development, roadways, etc. And that information is very critical to the work of this committee as we think about when we create a project, we create a district for a school, what may happen 4 or 5 years down the road. So they are able to provide very important information to the committee. And also Mr. Gay, he is the computer tech wizard. And he has already shown to the committee where their GIS services are capable of moving communities around and immediately allowing the committee to see the impact on different schools as we move communities from one school to another school. And so we couldn't do this work without their services, and we're very grateful to have the partnership with the Boone County Planning and Zoning Commission. As Mr. McCarter said, we've had 3 meetings. Our first meeting was on June 23rd, 2020. We went through the guidelines and considerations for redistricting. We went through the charge of the Board of Education to the committee, introduced that to the committee, and we began to look at presentation of the current scenarios. And as I said, there were 3 to start with. We also identified the task of the committee at this first meeting to review current scenarios, looking for pros and cons within each. We've had 2 more meetings since, August 3rd and August the 17th. We continue to review pros and cons of each scenario. We tweaked the current scenarios, and we came to a consensus on 2 scenarios to present to the Board of Education that you're going to see right now. Tonight, obviously, the board workshop gives us the opportunity to present the organization of the committee, present the current situation to the board, present scenarios from the committee that we have adopted to this point in time, and to listen to feedback from the board members, answer your questions, and get any further direction to this committee. We are scheduled to have 2 public forums. We will identify the families that will be possibly affected by the potential change in school districts, and we will notify those families through written communication of the invitation to the public forums. Anyone obviously can attend a public forum, but we want to make sure that we identify specific families that could be impacted by the scenarios as we move into the public forums, and we will give special invitation to those families to attend and let them know what's going on. Excuse me. We'll also be hanging maps in the schools that are impacted so that the communities can go up to their schools, practice, of course, all health-related requirements, but be able to see the maps like you see here displayed for you tonight, and get an idea of how their community, how their properties, residences will be impacted. Again, we'll present the current situation in those public forums. We'll review again the work of the committee at that time. We'll present scenarios to the public. We will invite comments and feedback from the public. We will take those comments and feedback back to the committee for review. Excuse me, back up one. And we take those comments very seriously. It has been the practice of this committee, and I've been your DPP since 2005, that we hold 2 public forums minimum. We want to give the public the opportunity, if they can't make it on one night, to at least have another night that they could possibly work into their schedule. So this will be done twice. We'll take all comments from the committees, from the public, take that back to committee, and we will look at everyone's comments, concerns, questions, and we will address them at committee as we continue to work to adapt a scenario or scenarios to work towards presentation for y'all for your final review. The final committee meetings, as I said, will be held after the public forums. We'll do exactly what I just said. We'll review public comments and feedback. We'll review the scenarios. We will try to reach consensus on final recommendation. We will bring to you 1 or more scenarios that balances enrollment, provides clear boundaries, and does focus on growth potential in our schools. Of the projects that we have done in this district in the last 15 years, there have been times where we've shared 1 scenario with the board for their review and final consideration, and there have been times where we have shared more than 1 scenario, just because we're looking at splitting hairs for the most part in some areas of the district. We don't know where that's going to go right now, but please be prepared that we could bring you more than 1 scenario for final review. So here's what we're looking at. Here's the first scenario that we have created. I know that in a PowerPoint presentation and the map that is provided to you in your packet, it's not real easy to see, but that's why we did bring tonight large maps of both scenarios, so that when we finish this presentation, you'll have an opportunity to peruse the scenarios and develop ideas, questions, concerns, whatever the case might be. Share them with the committee or share them with your board member representatives to the committee. This is scenario number 1. You will see that scenario number 1, when I compared it just a few moments to scenario number 2, moves more north up the interstate corridor. Obviously, it does take in the Steeplechase community and a small area of New Haven and a west of Interstate 75, a larger area of New Haven, the current New Haven district, east of I-75, and then you see that red line that runs east to west right above the word interstate. That's where the current New Haven boundary and the Collins boundary split, and you see going up above that red line the amount of area that is being taken from Collins Elementary School, and that would be moved into the Steeplechase School District. So what happens with this scenario? Under the Demographics and Growth Committee's proposed redistricting plan, the following major subdivisions would be redistricted Steeplechase Elementary School, in scenario 1. From Collins Elementary School, we would move Richwood North Estates, White Pine Village, and Wisteria Village into Steeplechase Elementary School District. Now, these are significant communities. Obviously, I did not list all the properties along Dixie Highway that we would be incorporating in moving from Collins Elementary School to Steeplechase, but you can see that on the map. But these are significant communities that would move from Collins Elementary School down to Steeplechase. From New Haven Elementary School, we would move significant communities of Deertrace, obviously Steeplechase, and also Sutherland community. The impact would look like this. Present capacity for Steeplechase Elementary School is being built at 650 students. Obviously, the present enrollment is 0. The redistricting proposal with moving those 2 areas that I just showed you would move 621 students into Steeplechase. Now, one thing I do want to identify at this point as a disclaimer, the numbers that you are seeing in practicing transparency, those numbers are from last spring. The school district, under direction from the Kentucky Department of Education, did not produce an end of the year superintendent annual attendance report because of moving to NTI Educational Services in March for the remainder of the school year. So these numbers are from last spring. I do want to note that, okay? But even though these numbers are from last spring, all of the population numbers I'm getting ready to show you, you still get a feel for the impact of this project, this model, on what it would do to the 3 schools involved: Collins Elementary School, New Haven Elementary School, and Steeplechase Elementary School. So Steeplechase would open at approximately 621 students. Collins would be impacted in this way. Present capacity is 672 students. The enrollment was 827 students, and scenario 1 would reduce that population at Collins Elementary School to 508 students. At New Haven Elementary School, present capacity is 900 students. The enrollment in the spring was 901 students, and scenario number 1 would reduce New Haven Elementary School to 599 students. So you get an idea there of the impact on the student populations. One thing I want to remind you at this point is the principals that are part of the committee, if you have questions for them, they do serve on the committee. They'll be more than happy to entertain your questions about current situations within their schools and how this project would impact their school population and them being able to provide educational programs and services to their student body. One element that we look at, and it was brought to primary point of conversation among the committee, was the socioeconomic impact on the schools involved. And you see that obviously Steeplechase has no percentage of free and or reduced lunch qualifying children, but under this scenario, Steeplechase would open with 74% free and or reduced lunch scenario. Collins currently is at 92%. There would be a reduction to 89%. And New Haven has a percentage of their population at 34% free and or reduced lunch, and that would drop to 27%. And then again, for the board members, this was a very extensive point of conversation within the committee and looking how the schools would be impacted, both in reduction and or possibly increase in free and or reduced lunch as we move children around. So that is scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, you can obviously see that it's like pulling the blue area, which is Steeplechase, down to the south. You see less area taken from Collins Elementary School and more predominant area taken from New Haven Elementary School to populate Steeplechase Elementary School. Under scenario 2, the major subdivisions that would be redistricted would be from Collins Elementary School, Old Lexington Villas, and Richwood North Estates. And from New Haven, Deertrace, Steeplechase, Sutherland, and a small area, Triple Crown called Jockey Club that I learned today was over in the area of Hicks Pike and 338. that far expansive area way to the west of the entrance to the primary thoroughfare for Triple Crown community. How this scenario 2 would impact: Steeplechase would open only at 521 students. Obviously, the capacity remains the same. For Collins Elementary School, the reduction would be to 682 students under scenario 2. And for New Haven Elementary School, the reduction would be down to 525 students from the present enrollment or the spring enrollment of 901. Socioeconomically, the impact: Steeplechase would open at 60% under scenario 2. Steeplechase Elementary School would open at 60% free and or reduced lunch population based on student population data from last spring. Collins would only be reduced from 92% down to 91%, and New Haven would be reduced from 34% to 27%. That's the presentation. Just in summary, a couple points that I want to mention to the board before we begin to entertain questions. There's two significant themes to look at in this project, in my opinion. And I only voice my opinion because of the number of projects that I've been a part of for the last several years. First of all, is student population. Obviously, one scenario gives a greater reduction to some of the schools over the other scenario. The second theme, and was presented to you, was the impact on socioeconomic status. One, socioeconomic status bit of data in one scenario was obviously significantly much higher than in the other scenario. But it is truly a measure of trying to get the best for our students in balancing student population and socioeconomic status. So I strongly consider, as a recommendation to all board members, that you think about those. Yes, one shows very different numbers socioeconomically for all the schools involved. One shows the scenarios show difference in student population for the scenarios involved. We just have to think about, what's the best. And that's why we keep going back to that vector that we identify first and foremost with these projects. What is the best for all these students involved? We've heard a lot of great discussion from our principals as a part of the committee meetings that we have had. And from those discussions, from Mr. Barracks on moving children, transporting them, once we can get our students back into school, the impact on time and efficiency of transportation, of moving our children. And it has been a great amount of work and communication among the committee members. And pretty much that's all I want to share with you right now, but I did want to bring those points to light for you to get, for you to think about, please. And so with that, Mr. McCarter, I'm going to close the presentation. I'll stay up here and entertain any comments and or questions from the board. Again, as Mr. McCarter said at the beginning, we are not taking any action. We're giving you the opportunity to see what we have done since June as a full committee and get your input at this time. Couldn't have timed that any better. Perfect.
All right, so Karen and I have been involved. Are there any specific questions that anybody wants to ask or someone they want to hear from?
Mr. Chair, I have a question regarding scenario 1 to 2. It seems that there are at least 100 more students in scenario 1 at Steeplechase versus 2. And based upon the growth development in that area, is that still going to be able to cover eventually when they potentially would reach capacity if it was scenario 2 versus 1?
Mr. Brown, if I'm hearing you correctly, thinking about growth in that area overall. Right now, that area of southern Boone County, once you get south of Steeplechase community, it's large tracts of communities with very small numbers of student population, excluding Steeplechase community itself. Okay, and I'm talking about south of Steeplechase to the west. For example, along Chambers Road, moving over towards the intersection of Chambers Road and 338. Large parcels of land, very small number of students that reside in that area. The significant impacting force that would be behind expansive development in that area would be the construction of sewer lines in that area that have not occurred. Mr. Costello, Mr. Gay can speak to that probably more succinctly than I. I did serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 8 years, and one thing I learned from Mr. Costello in that time period was growth is not going to occur without two infrastructure identities, roads and sewer lines. And right now, that area is not in sewer line regions. And so therefore, there's not any immediate construction for the south and west areas adjacent to Steeplechase community. So there wouldn't be immediate growth. We don't even have, when the school opens, we don't even have Grand National Boulevard connecting into Chambers Road. And Mr. Costello may be able to answer that a little better than I. We don't know the time period exactly on when Grand National may connect into Chambers Road, which would link Richwood Road with Chambers Road to the south of the school. So this isn't something that's going to growth in the form of new subdivisions. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Costello. Growth in the idea of new subdivisions is not in the immediate future in this area. Am I correct on that, sir?
I don't know if you want me to get correct.
Please do.
Mike is correct. A couple of things going on. You have the Triple Crown's pretty much built out. I mean, there's really, unless they acquire more land, they're pretty much landlocked what they have there now. There's probably in their overall master plan, maybe 100 to 150 lots. And again, depending on the type of housing they build, sometimes it doesn't generate as many children as starter homes or first level homes. Steeplechase, the same thing. It's pretty much built out. There's a small section across the street from the new school, but it's only like 40 or 50 lots. So that's done. But there's a lot of limitations on the sewer down there. And unless the sanitation district has a pot of gold and it starts expanding sewer, and they have so many demands region-wide, we don't see that occurring. Most of the growth is to the north in Hebron. That's where they expanded the sewer. So that whole area where the new Graves Road interchange is, as well as on North Bend Road, that's the greatest push right now. So other than like Traymore in the Union area, and possibly that's where the sewer exists now. And in the town center, there's a project, the first phase of the town center is going to be coming in, but again, it's going to be more multi-family apartments, a little different type of development than you normally would see. But I don't see, Mike is correct. If you had to pinpoint a time period, I don't see large subdivisions or even medium-sized subdivisions developing down there for the next 5 years. And there may be a farm here and there, but I don't see anything. Your greatest growth is going to be between Bailey, Shannon, and Westbrook there. There's some land that's available, and the continuation of Bailey, Shannon, all the way down to Hathaway, which again, we planned for that. So, but the immediate Richwood area where this school would be located, I just don't see a lot of growth unless you're pulling from another area for kids to go in that school. Sure.
Mr. Fryman, was that able to answer your question as far as the thoughts about growth in that area?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ford, do any of the scenarios reduce or alter either Title I or Friskies or anything like that that we need to throw in the mix? Or?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, ma'am. The schools that currently have centers would remain with those family resource youth service centers moving into the near future. We actually have several more schools besides the ones that we have currently with centers that qualify. However, we've been notified by the Academy for Health and Family Services from their executive offices in Frankfurt that because of no funding, there's no reason to apply for any centers in the near future until funding is made available. You know that we're working under a one-year budget from the General Assembly this past year, and there's going to be a significant budget review for the state coming up, and it does not appear that there's going to be any more funding generated to the Academy for Health and Family Services to open centers. But the ones, so we're not going to be able to open centers, but we're not going to lose the centers that we have currently.
Mr. Ford, I have a question on the communication that goes out. Will it be in multiple languages? Because those are areas where we do have different languages, to make sure that they also have the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. Through the services that Mrs. Rudman is able to provide to the school district, we have the capability of taking a letter and generating it in multiple languages and being able to put that out. We know that we have a couple pockets in the area, specifically the area down Dixie Highway, that are currently those children attending Collins Elementary School, where we would be looking for both, we would be looking both at Congolese families and Hispanic families. And with Mrs. Rudman's resources that she has at her availability, we can transfer those letters into languages that we will be able to communicate to the families. And we'll be able to, it's my understanding, Ms. Rudman, is that correct? We can also post those letters on the website in multiple languages. Am I correct on that? So yes, ma'am, we'll be able to communicate to those families.
Okay, thank you.
In scenario 2, I see that Collins is still above capacity. From what I understand with Collins, one of the biggest concerns is lunch. Does that offer enough relief that kind of, so you don't have to have like a 4-hour lunch period anymore? Or I don't know, how does that impact?
Great
Is
question.
that enough
We've had
relief for you
discussion.
guys?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Lauren.
So I think it still would, because we would be over capacity. I think we're still looking at a situation that, our facilities are not keeping up with, the amount of students. Right now, we can feed up to 500 students breakfast in the morning. And so it's a constant. We have 4 lines running, so 2 grab and go and 2 hot breakfast. And then lunch, it's like what you're saying. It takes us a long time to get through that because we can only fit like 1 grade level in the cafeteria at one time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Can I get some?
Yes, sir. Mr. Costello. Thanks, Stephen.
So I just happen to be on the Master Facilities Plan Committee, and that's a priority to upgrade the cafeteria area. So that ranks as one of the highest priorities. So in theory, he'll get that, hopefully, if you approve it. But that's a big plus for him.
Mr. Ford,
Yes, sir.
how common is it to open a new school where you're almost at capacity?
Constant.
Scenario 1 is 621, and if I understand right, there's at least 45 lots in the back of Steeplechase that are in the process of being built. And if those do build out over a period of time here in the very near future, as long as the contractors and builders stay on track, then you'll be at capacity within less than the next probably 2 to 3 years, dependent upon how many builds can happen per year.
In this type of project, like I said, I've had the opportunity to be part of many projects all the way from Camp Ernst Middle School to the current. What we have seen over time is when a project is being developed, and that project is being developed in an area where there's going to be possibly a small growth and then not an expansive growth after that, as we related to just a few minutes ago, because of the nature of the communities in west and south of Steeplechase, it's very common that we can open at this number, and we have opened schools close to capacity with other projects. When we think about single-family homes historically, over an expanse of almost 15 years, we have developed an equation where we factor in getting half of a child for a single-family home as far as the increase to the student population. So if there are, I'll say 50, if there are 50 lots still available after the elementary school is completed and that last phase of Steeplechase is opened up, that's the potential for 25 more students coming to us from Steeplechase community itself. And of course, that's going to take time because obviously the infrastructure has to be laid down first before the first foundation is even poured for a home. So we're not talking about an increase in student population quickly in that area, and that gives us time to evaluate the architectural design layout of the school and make sure that we are utilizing all areas of the school to its utmost efficiency for the student population. There's another factor that does come into play when you think about a school building project, and that's called a squeeze factor. The Department of Education requires that with any new construction project, a student population has to be presented. That's one of the variables for approval for that project, and it's a very conservative number. We have many schools, I say that because we have many schools throughout the district that have a student population number identified, and that is part of the facility plan for what's provided to the state for approval, but we got a lot more kids in those buildings than that initial capacity identifies. And that's called the squeeze factor, being able to go over that projected population with initial program design. So with those two factors in place, we have had other schools look at the same type of identity as we got ready to open them, and we've been able to open those schools close to capacity and not reach overcrowdedness in any of those projects until it came time down the road to look at a project to build on to a facility. So that has occurred on several projects, Mr. Fryman.
Sorry, I keep muting my Zoom. I wouldn't mind hearing from Mr. Barracks, if you don't mind to share a few thoughts on each of the scenarios and what you're seeing from a transportation perspective.
I guess in first case, what I'd like to say is both scenarios are supportable and both are doable. My preference, though, in looking at the maps and the traffic flows, is I prefer, honestly, from my perspective, scenario A. I think it gives cleaner boundaries on major thoroughfares. We reverse a problem we have on Dixie Highway with the neighborhoods that were outlined moving from Collins to the new school. In that scenario, we have to go down Dixie towards those and back and reverse the flow about twice a day. If you're familiar with the traffic flow in that part of the county, it can be a significant delay. There's lots of interruptions in traffic, other external factors we can't control. Many times we have difficulty with the amount of time that those students are on those buses. Scenario A would allow us to kind of flow that traffic back towards the south and then towards the new school on a couple of different major routes. So that's kind of my view of this right now.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the board?
Mr. Board, I know that to make sure that all viewpoints are represented, Mrs. Krieger and her parent have been here representing Mann Elementary, yet there's been no discussion of how Mann Elementary fell into this project or fell out of this project. So if you could just, for the benefit of the board, maybe go over some of that conversation on the numbers of Mann and why they are not included in either scenario.
I need to get a chart out. Give me just 1 second. As I presented at the onset of the presentation tonight, a year ago, when we first started looking at where Steeplechase Elementary School was going to be constructed, at the district office, we had to take into consideration immediately what schools could potentially be impacted by a new school in this area. So with that conversation, Mann Elementary School was initially identified as a school that could be potentially affected by this project. Therefore, as the committee was organized, Ms. Krieger was invited to be a part of the committee and asked to provide a parent representative, which she did, and they have been in attendance at all the meetings, and they've been very vocal and provided great discussion to the committee, both about other schools. I want to applaud Ms. Krieger. Her conversations with the committee have been not only about her school, but the impact on her peers' schools as well, as we looked at the different scenarios, and she's been very supportive of her peers, even though what we have seen with the development of the two scenarios, Mann Elementary School is not impacted. And the reason for that, as far as Mann children being moved to the new school, is because of the location of the boundaries of Mann Elementary School in regards to New Haven Elementary School and Steeplechase Elementary School. Steeplechase Elementary School, as I said earlier, is being constructed at the southernmost end right now of Steeplechase Community. The road that runs through Steeplechase Community to the school is Grand National Boulevard. Directly across from the entrance to Steeplechase Community is the Richwood entrance to Triple Crown Community. The main thoroughfare road that runs through Triple Crown Community runs through New Haven Elementary School district. So think about, you've got Mann Elementary School to the north region of the Triple Crown Community going up towards Highway 42, and New Haven School District, under the current scenario, wraps around Shirley Mann Elementary School. So you would be going through New Haven District to the Shirley Mann District if you were going to pull students from Shirley Mann School District down to Steeplechase Elementary School. And that area of New Haven Elementary School that is north of Richwood Road is not part of either one of the two projects. That part of New Haven Elementary School has been left untouched and remained at New Haven Elementary School. The properties that we're looking at from New Haven in both scenarios to move to the new school are south of Richwood Road. So you would move transportation-wise, thinking about Mr. Byers and his staff, you would be moving children through a part of New Haven Elementary School that's not being redistricted to go up and grab children from Shirley Mann Elementary School, bring them back through, right down that corridor of Triple Crown, through an area of New Haven Elementary School District, again, not being touched, and then bring them into Steeplechase and taking them down to the new school. Again, there's always the potential. And when we looked at the potential for schools that could be impacted, at that point in time, depending on where we moved the districts to populate Steeplechase, there could have been an idea where that area of Triple Crown, straight up the primary thoroughfare, could have been impacted. But you see that it wasn't impacted because of the number of children who are currently in the community of Steeplechase populating the new school. And those children are all New Haven children. Again, Ms. Krieger and her parent representative have a voiced conversation to the committee in support of their peers. They've also voiced communication to the committee about the potential of reducing the population at Shirley Mann Elementary School, possibly not to Steeplechase, but moving them to another school, and therefore reducing that population. That was not the initial charge of the board to the committee, so that's been in conversation only, but it has been part of the discussion within committee meetings. It has. But right now, that's why Shirley Mann Elementary School, the geographical location of the school district for Shirley Mann Elementary School, and the logistics of moving children through a section of New Haven Elementary School District that's not even being touched, to bring them down south of Richwood Road into Steeplechase community and on down to the school. That's the reason that Shirley Mann Elementary School has not been identified as moving children into the new school at this time. And I hope that answers your question.
All right, any other questions? Anything from the committee that you want to share that we maybe missed?
So if I'm reading the numbers correctly, the scenario one provides the most relief to Collins Elementary, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Between the two scenarios, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And most likely there will not be another opportunity to reduce the capacity or to reduce the enrollment at Collins Elementary because the growth is in other parts of the county. So this might be the one time that we have to reduce some of those numbers at Collins to provide some relief.
Yes, ma'am. It's a very good observation. The school district has, under the direction of our past superintendent, Dr. Poe, the school district does have a comprehensive growth plan, and that growth plan for the district that parallels and models the comprehensive growth plan of Boone County that's provided by the Planning and Zoning Commission does identify need areas for future schools. And the next area, as Mr. Costello alluded to, is the addressing of northern Boone County, specifically the area north of the 275 corridor, and also the area of central Boone County when you think about the intersecting area of Camper's Road and Hathaway Road. Also, when you think about next projects, that comprehensive plan for the school district looks at, in the more immediate future, a middle school to provide relief in the northern end of the county. There's a small high school that's part of that comprehensive plan for the school district, and there is an elementary school in the mystical near future for that area of Hathaway Road and Camp Ernest. So long answer to your question, Ms. Powell, I apologize, but I want you to understand where it's all coming from, because there has been there has been a comprehensive study in this area of where do we need schools. No, ma'am, there is not on the near future on that plan anything that would provide relief for Collins in the, not only the immediate future, but the far future as well.
Well, I just remember when Long Branch was open and the discussion on the redistricting with Stevens Elementary and the concern of opening Long Branch at capacity. But in order to relieve Stevens, it needed to be brought under capacity because there would not be another elementary school opportunity to relieve that capacity of Stevens. So it's the same kind of scenario that we're looking at.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
On the capacity issue, we talked about a lot. And since I've been doing this since back to opening Urban back, I guess probably was maybe one of the first ones that I've been through on the board. The opening at capacity has, while you're opening a school to relieve capacity, you don't want to get into hot water of that school opening at capacity. But over the years, I've learned two things. We need to be allowed to build our elementary schools for a minimum of 750 students for growth in Boone County. And while we've already alluded to the fact that our growth has tapered, I mean, when I first started on the board, we were going anywhere from 800 to 1,000 students a year. And if we could have opened Steeplechase at for a capacity of 750, we wouldn't be having these conversations. So that's one of the issues, is not that you want mega elementary schools, because I don't, but it would help in these situations to be able to not overburden anyone if we could build them a little bit bigger. And eventually we know they're going to be filled up. And historically, while they will not let us build over 650 for an elementary school, they certainly will let us add on to one 2 years later, which we have done over and over and over again. So as long as our bonding capacity remains healthy and we maintain our conservative approach to our budget as we always have, in 2023, if we need to add classrooms, we can do that much easier than we will ever be allowed to build an elementary school at 750. And the other schools that Mr. Ford has alluded to have been on the future plans as long as I've been on the board. So eventually we will get there.
Any other questions? Karen, I just want to make sure, did you say Boone County High School was the first school that you helped build?
yes, feels like it.
I can't help myself. She loves me.
This part always remember it's 2-1 Rocky.
I don't have my right.
It's okay. It's in the heart.
I do have my Stevens stingers though. Thank you, Mr. Barlow.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Anything we missed or should think about? Are we good? Okay.
Mr. McIntyre, if I may, with that right there.
Sure.
The committee at this point in time will be moving to meet again prior to the scheduling of the first public forum. As I stated, there are 2 members from the board that serve on the committee currently. So if those committee members bring ideas from the full board, we will be meeting before the public forum. Also, I want to offer the invitation that you can meet with me at any time at the board to review any of the PowerPoint presentation or any commentary that was made this evening, and share thoughts and ideas, and I will take them on behalf of you to the committee But if there are no future charges to the committee, then we will be moving forward to present these two scenarios at our first public forum, which, as I said, will be scheduled towards the end of September, possibly the first week of October. That's all I wanted to share, because that's just the idea for the board members knowing where we go moving forward. Thank you very much for that opportunity.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. We are at item 4, adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? So we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Did y'all say aye down there? Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.